Thank you so much, John, and thank you so much to the organizers of the event for putting this very important conversation together. Conversations around the new Cold War and the hybrid wars that are developing from the United States are very important to have in this current context. And so, as you mentioned, the People's Forum, I am a community organizer and educator who shares collective spaces of work with other organizers and social movements through the People's Forum and also the Popular Education Project. And we have been following the electoral process and elections on a basis of what these will mean to our ability to build a strong and unified movement that is anti-capitalist, anti-imperialist, anti-racist. And I would like to share some of the reflections and some of our analysis from the perspective of social movements in the United States. What we understand are some of the challenges and possibilities, what we consider some immediate tasks to be for organizations and people seeking systemic and structural change in the United States, and folks that understand also the need to build relationships of solidarity and collaboration with sister nations. You have all mentioned the tense situation that we are living currently in the United States, the fact that the entire country and many around the world are waiting anxiously on what the outcome of this election will be. One, because we know that Trump, as a result of neoliberalism and the imperialist hegemonic, the deep racism, the xenophobia, the patriarchy, the anti-democratic, the nationalist, far right, and all the ugly and evil values that make this oppressive and exploitive system what it is. And still, 70 million people in this country voted for Trump, not a number to be easily dismissed. Secondly, because we know that this imperialist project of war and occupation and extraction for many around the world is important to keep abreast of the situation, because it's a matter of livelihood, it's a matter of the empire, which has utilized all its forces at all times to be able to subordinate and dominate. Margaret previously shared, the two parties are essentially in lockstep when it comes to imperialism. As it concerns to China and Russia and Venezuela, Democrats and Republicans are enthusiastically promoting more sanctions and more aggressive policies that could lead to war. So although tactics may change, the strategy continues to be one of war in its many forms. And we must be clear about that. So the question for and from social movements becomes, how do we utilize this moment to advance the struggles of the majority of the people in the United States, the poor and working class? How do we strengthen organizations and unify movements? And how do we cement and promote values and projects that stand against war in all its forms in the United States and abroad? At this moment, it seems very unlikely that Trump will succeed in his attempts to continue in the White House. The corporate media and some sectors of the ruling class have abandoned Trump. We could see that because when we turn on Fox News yesterday and we see all the folks debating and talking and are standing against the positions of Trump, that's telling for an outlet that has been mostly pushing Trump's agenda. It's important to understand that he has openly attacked one of the sacred pillars of the capitalist system and its state. He has worked intensely to delegitimize the political system of the United States, which has served the ruling class to govern the majority of people. And so these attacks towards the political system and its institutions represent a threat to the ruling class. The overturning of millions of votes or support to Trump at this moment would mean that tens of millions could adopt a more revolutionary attitude towards the status quo. Also, if Biden wins, Trump has created the conditions for fascist and ultra-right groups to take the streets. The United States ruling class does not want destabilization in the streets, in their economic system, and in their political system. And so they will do whatever they can to try and stop that. Currently, there is a very broad anti-Trump coalition that is being led by the Democrats, and it's economic and political machine. The call is to count every vote, which is most definitely a call that is supported by the many. People want to believe that their vote will count, although we know that in the United States, popular democracy has never counted, right? Um, the the Democratic Party is not calling into question voter suppression. They're not calling into question the lack of participatory democracy. And it's not on their best interest to do so because they've also participated in voter suppression. They have also pushed forward policies that become obstacles for the participation of the people. And many of the most damaging policies for the working class in the last 30 years have been led by the Democrats. And so it's a huge challenge for social movements in the United States in thinking about building unity and strengthening mass movement when the Democratic Party has placed its economic and political structure in the process of absorbing the social unrest that went on beginning in May with after the attacks to George Floyd, you know, the folks that have been protesting around mass evictions, the folks that have been protesting because of lack of employment, like all this social unrest has been somehow absorbed by the Democrats. And it's a huge challenge for, again, social movements to be able to strengthen and unify and build an actual movement that can birth a political vehicle outside of any of the two wings of the ruling class political system. And it's a huge challenge, but it's not impossible, right? And I think we need to be able to look at the nuances to understand that it is possible for us to do it. It might take a while. Historically, and in this context, as I was saying, progressive sectors and social movements have been subordinated to the democratic wing of the bourgeoisie. The labor movement, many NGOs, you know, nonprofit organizations who have a base have been absorbed by the Democratic Party. And the Democratic Party understands this and is taking advantage of this scenario to gather the strength and advance its agenda under the banner of all united for a better future. And so Democrats, again, are identifying leaders in the grassroots, are identifying folks that could carry the message in this political context. Black women, Black youth, brown young men. I mean, the historically marginalized, the leadership that could be potentially leading the masses in another way are being also absorbed by the ruling class. It is important to consider that although this is a tight race and obviously with high stakes, there has been an unprecedented number of voters taking the tolls. And those who are voting for the Democratic Party are not necessarily, and this is where I think the light is at the end of the tunnel, they're not necessarily voting for the Democratic Party, and they're not necessarily voting committed to the agenda of Biden and Harris. They are voting against Trump. This is a vote against fascism, is a vote against racism, is a vote against xenophobia, is against all the things, again, that I mentioned before are representative of an exploitive system. And it's you know, as we know, the Democratic Party will not resolve in any way, shape, or form the issues related to employment, the issues related to housing, to healthcare, to student debt, and the deepening of the economic crisis, because we will see that, right? We see that Wall Street will continue to work based on speculation and creating bubbles. And those bubbles will continue to burst, and people will continue to lose housing. We will continue to lose employment. And so it's coming, and it's important from social movements, from organizations to prepare for the more subtle ways in which imperialism and capitalism has learned to govern, and where many are becoming more and more aware in the United States in the ways in which the system works, the oppressive mechanisms that it utilizes. We're talking about a post-COVID USA. We're talking about unprecedented, exorbitant unemployment rates. We're talking about post, the past 8 months, where people have actually seen the racism, the blatant attacks coming from the state and its institutions. And so it won't be easily
Claudia, could you just
that
bring
sorry.
you're taking your speaking time. Could you just bring your remarks to a close?
I'm sorry. I couldn't
You've
hear.
had,
Oh
you've
yeah, sorry.
had the 10 minutes.
So sorry. So
Just
sorry. So wait, so just to close, we expect more attacks by the state of social movements and political organizations. We expect different tactics coming from the Democrats, but the strategy of war will continue. We're estimating that times of great upheaval and social mobilizations are coming. This will require those struggle. We know that we are strengthening the anti-war movement through the connection of working class struggles at home and abroad. We must connect the economic war against poor working class in the United States and working class folks in China and Cuba and Venezuela. The use of militarization in Seattle and New York, with the occupation and militarization in Palestine, the tactics utilized against people in Chile, and the backing of popular elected governments being overthrown around the world. And so there's a lot of work from social movements. And I guess my biggest message is that, yes, these are moments of intense scenarios politically and socially. I believe that is also hope in the changing of the national consciousness and the politicization of new era of willing to fight for structural and systematic change and the destruction and the abolition of what capitalism is and what imperialism has meant to the world.